Welcome to Her Fund Talks, the podcast where we will deep dive into gender conscious investment and women led innovation. In today's episode, I have the pleasure to host Salomé Le Goff, a responsible person for the several startup training programs at Willa, a French incubator specializing in women led startups. Each year, Willa accompanies over 150 startups in different industries in their launch and growth on the French market. Though challenges faced by startups are often market specific, Willa also observes that a common theme remains amongst women-led startups, no matter the sector. And this common theme is access to funding. So I hope we will be able to shed some light on some of the challenges and how we can overcome them today with Salomé. Thank you for being here with us today, Salomé. Can I start with a question which is actually exactly targeted at what we were saying? What are the primary challenges women-led startups face in securing funding nowadays in comparison to their male counterparts, in your opinion, and also as part of your experience and work?
Thank you so much for having me, Milena. I'm so glad to be able to speak with you today. And yes, let's get right into the subject. So it is true that we see a rise in women-led startups today, but they still face enormous challenges when it comes to accessing funds. And I think that we can separate these challenges into two types of barriers. We see some really internal barriers and limitations, and some external barriers and limitations. So I think to start on the internal side, it's true that some women and a lot of women actually have a lot of limiting beliefs and internal barriers when it comes to accessing funds. And these limiting beliefs can come as a reflection from conscious or unconscious biases and stereotypes that they may have met during their past professional experiences. And they can be translated in, for example, a difficulty to ask for funding in the first place. They can find it difficult to price their work. They can be met with the imposter syndrome. So a lot of women in the first place, women entrepreneurs may not dare to ask for funding. And then if they do, they may ask for lower amounts. So to investors, this may send a signal that is a bit less encouraging, because they might think that they're not as daring, that they don't have as much ambition as their male counterparts. So this is the first internal factor. And I think that when women manage to overcome these internal limitations, they are met with very real external barriers. And there are many external barriers. The first ones are the external biases and stereotypes, and these can be conscious or unconscious when it comes to investors. And they can be present in ways, for example, during pitching interviews, investors can question women about their ability to commit, their ability to lead their startups. And they can also put women in defensive situations where they really have to defend themselves during the interviews, which is quite uncomfortable for them. So this is a first external bias and challenge. And I think that overall, unfortunately, today, women are still very present in sectors that are traditionally associated with women, like fashion, like beauty, like education. And these sectors today still receive smaller, on average, smaller investments than sectors like tech, like AI, like finance. So they're also looking for smaller amounts, and they're also receiving smaller amounts. And we also released a study actually at Willa at the beginning of the year, which showed that more and more women are also turning towards the impact sector. So they're focusing maybe on business models that are a little bit more socially responsible, and that may not match with...
And that also orientated at longer life cycles in order to get that investment return. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that might not, that doesn't align today with traditional VC expectations. So this is also in and of itself a big barrier in access to funding. And so these are a lot of barriers, and perhaps I might add one more. And I hope we'll get to talk about it a little bit later, but women today still don't have sufficient access to network. and networks are so very much still male dominated, and they are a real opportunity for introductions, for referrals, a funding opportunity for women. So the fact
Actually,
that they don't
nowadays, I think, as you were saying, networks are becoming much more a capital, an asset, because if you are able to transform that connection into market access, that could make quite of a difference, right? Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So thank you for making that point. So if we continue then in that line of thought, how can we encourage more investors to become then gender conscious and support initiatives like the one we started with her fund, but similar ones where we're creating these opportunities for female-led founders to have more access to funding?
Yeah, I would say that the first thing to do, and it's what we're doing with her fund, is by starting conversations. And I think that the first step towards action is awareness. And today, though, we are aware that there are a lot of inequalities, that there are still disparities in the entrepreneurial landscape. I'm not quite sure that investors today realize the gap that still exists when it comes to funding between male and female entrepreneurs. So really starting these conversations, raising awareness, and it's what we're doing with the webinars with her fund, it's talking about it, is the best way to make mindsets evolve and make investors more gender conscious. And once we've done that, I think it's also about, and in the conversations we're having, it's shifting the mindset around investing in female startups, and not only portraying it as a moral imperative or as a good deed that investors have to do, but also being able to show that today it's a strategic investment for them. It's a financially sound strategy, that it is shown that investing in diverse teams is a way to tap into untapped markets. It's a way to gain fresh perspectives. We know today that women-led startups can have a higher return on investment.
Like, what was the percentage? Because I know we've been talking about that, and there are some real figures besides. So there are statistics besides this conversation that they do bring more value, but there is also statistics. I think it was 30% or something like that, or you have a concrete statistic.
For the return on investment statistic, I don't quite have it with me. I do know, though, that mixed teams have a higher performance of 63%.
63%. Wow, it's much higher, the diverse.
In terms of performance. Yeah. So, but this is mixed teams, not only women-led startups.
Yes. But what we are talking about is also bringing that diversity full front, because it will have a real financial impact. And this is part of the story and the conversation, right?
Yes. Definitely. So it's really starting these conversations about and bringing diversity forefront. And I think what we're also trying to do, and it's the second essential part, and not just stopping at conversations, but providing the tools and the education to investors. And that's what we're trying to do at her fund. It's giving them the opportunity to be able to recognize and mitigate their own biases, or biases that they may witness in their organizations, for example, so that in the future they can make more deliberate decisions and over time increase the diversity in their investment portfolios. So it's
what do you
conversations and training.
Yes. Thank you. What do you envision actually as the future of the investment landscape for women startups? Women-led startups. Is it looking optimistic, or should we be concerned, like we were very much concerned 2 or 3 years ago, because the statistics was really dreadful. So I'm wondering, has something changed?
Well, I think I can't help but be optimistic about the future of the investment landscape. I think since we're seeing a trend that more and more investors are being interested in gender lens investing, well, I'm hoping that this trend will only continue to grow, especially as through these conversations, they realize that investing in female startups is a very smart business strategy for them as well. And I also hope that what will make a positive change is that as time passes, we'll also ask investors to take greater accountability and transparency around diversity metrics in their investment portfolios, because it will become something that is absolutely essential. And then, of course, we also have a hope at Willa is that there are going to be more and more women that are going to rise to leadership positions in investing, and then
This will
it should
lead.
continue and benefit women-led startups as the more.
This will actually feed in itself then another culture. Can I share with you? I am actually hoping that in a couple of years it will become fashionable to invest in female-led startups, and I think we are contributing to with our podcast and with our conversations also to that, and with the insights that we are sharing. Because I know you've been working specifically at Willa with female-led companies. Can you share a specific example of where a company or a sector had a real challenge in securing funding, and that actually can be extrapolated how this is impeding the general landscape for investment?
Yeah, I think since my experience at Willa, I could share a lot of examples, but perhaps I can share one, which is a woman that we were able to interview actually as part of her fund, because we went on the field to try to understand what their needs were and what the challenges they were meeting were. And so she's a French entrepreneur that launched a startup in the education industry, education sector in France. And she faced really considerable challenges when she tried to raise funds, though on paper, she was a very promising startup. She was winning all of the contests in France. She was getting a lot of media coverage. She was even getting attention from the president and from the National Assembly. Except when she tried to raise 500,000 euros, she struggled for over a year, which is enormous. And the obstacles were what she heard from investors were, firstly, that the education sector for them was not as attractive as other sectors, and that it was considered to them as less of a priority because the return on investment was not as high. So it's what we said earlier about some sectors being more attractive than others. They also told her that she didn't have enough key performance indicators, though she already had an app, she already had a lot of users. And she told us that to her, this was a clear example of a blatant discrimination because she met around the same time a male entrepreneur that raised much more money than her in a much shorter period.
In the education
industry, yes, in the same sector. So he raised much more money in a shorter amount of time with only a PowerPoint. So the KPI argument really didn't stand in that example. So she was very disappointed by that. And she said overall, she felt that she didn't really tick the traditional VC boxes. It was an under-promising sector to them. She was a mother. She didn't have quite the right educational background or the right professional experiences prior. And so she was just met with an impossible mountain of bias and stereotype that she couldn't get over. And there was just no discussing. It just ended the discussion and didn't give her a fair chance at that moment.
Yeah, so it's actually also about equal access to that funding. That is very important. And I think, as you were saying, what is even more striking is that it's not recognized as an issue. And I think that's why, as we've been talking also with other guests of mine, that we need to raise the level of education for the investors, so that they start really seeing opportunities beyond the bubble in which, it's been successful, and it's been also in a way hype and hipsy to be part of. So what do you think, what role does access to networks and mentorship, like the one we are building also with her fund, but similar ones, and like the one that you are creating at Willa, has also on the future of female founders and female-led startups?
Yeah, network plays an essential role for the success of a startup. And I was going to say it's funny, but it's not very funny. But we interviewed a lot of startups as part of her fund from all European countries that are represented in the consortium. to really ask what they were struggling with. And the number one thing that came out was access to network. And so this is quite jarring when we see how network impacts startup success, because it is essential for numerous reasons. It's essential to build connections with investors, to build relationships with them. A lot of funding opportunities come through these introductions, these warm introductions, the referrals, the word of mouth. And so not having access to that really stops you from having access to these opportunities in the first place. So that is why networks are important. And I think you were mentioning networks and mentorship. And mentorship is also essential, especially for women-led startups, because earlier I mentioned all the internal and limiting beliefs they may have, and mentorship is a great way for them to build confidence, to have a second opinion, to sharpen their growth strategy, to improve their pitch. And then in turn, this facilitates their access to funding. So for these reasons, access to network and mentorship is essential. However, today, it's sad to see that it's still very male dominated, and it remains, some people refer it to as boys clubs, because a lot of this networking happens during informal activities like after work drinks or some specific sports. And today, women still have limited access to these activities, and so to the networks. And so
maybe we can introduce some new types of clubs and new ways. You know, that would be infectious, and they'll want to introduce as practices, as you were saying. But that is so true. I think it's also, as you were saying, very much related to keeping that intrinsic motivation, that you're able to actually be very successful in this space, even though there hasn't been so much traction, of success yet. That's very important, as you were noting, for mentorship. And let me ask you one last question. I know that, for example, France and Willa, you are quite well known that you are supporting the startup culture. You're supporting this type of, let's say, pursuing career opportunity or life opportunity, also for female leaders and founders. How can we scale this? Is there a way to promote collaboration? And what are the type of collaborations? Can we find these type of partners that want to work with us in order to make this a much more impactful space?
I think that the Her Fund initiative in and of itself is based on collaboration, because we're a consortium of 9 different countries. So within our organization, we have limitless opportunities and collaborations opportunities in our different countries. And we are even representing different organizations, because we're consulting groups or incubators, accelerators, media. So the aim of the consortium, of the Her Fund consortium in and of itself, is already to establish these links between different European countries, best connected, less connected, to amplify impact. And I think, of course, we can even go further than that. And using our different networks, as you said, Willa, we're very well connected in France, and I think all of the Her Fund members are very well connected in their own countries. We can reach out to these different potential partners. For example, we could partner with venture capital firms in different countries, as they are more and more interested in supporting female-led startups, but maybe they're having trouble identifying high potential female founders. And so Her Fund could perhaps act as a bridge for them. And it's what we're trying to do, is encourage this dialogue. I think we could also perhaps link with other incubators and accelerators in different countries that are specializing in women entrepreneurship, and really put all of our resources together to make a very solid base, support base for female entrepreneurs.
And also maybe, as you were saying, some strategic partnerships that you could identify, and we can all think of where we're actually connecting the dots, right? So that it's not, because one of the challenges is that there are a lot of projects, there are opportunities, there are initiatives, but somehow they are not put together. And I think we are trying to do this at Her Fund, to bring all of them in one place, so that this creates critical mass. Do you have any other recommendations or something that you would like actually to pass on as a message from your expertise or point of view? It's been so lovely talking to you and having this very frank, down-to-earth conversation.
No, yeah, I think perhaps to finish, it would be overall, Her Fund is a beautiful initiative and can really maximize its impact by creating all of these collaborations around Europe and then perhaps more globally. And overall, the more stakeholders that we get to involve, the greater the influence we will have to advocate for women-led startups. So I think I will end on this sentence. But thank you so much, Milena, for having me. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Salomé. You've been a champion in this, and thank you so much for your insights.